Today we're going to look at the William Shakespeare's play, Othello. So when we start off by looking at Othello, in this tragic play by Shakespeare, there's a focus on the evil of man, an evil that results in the death of the tragic hero, but also in deaths of the innocent and the good. Now the play is going to force us to ask how such qualities such as love, goodness, justice, and loyalty can survive in the world given man's capacity for evil and destruction. Now, when we take a look at tragedy, that's a specific type of drama that presents a serious subject matter about human suffering and corresponding terrible events. Now, the pattern of all tragedies is that some action takes place or a character does something that throws life into turmoil. Put simply, social order prevails at the beginning of the play, but very quickly we see society in a state of disorder. Now, the effect of this is that it makes us think about the complex nature of man and the world we live in. So in Othello specifically, Shakespeare gives full consideration to the disruptive effects of the man's behavior. Now, in fact, the consequences are so serious that it leads to the death of the main character at the end of the play. Now, any play that ends with the death of the main character has to be considered a tragedy. Now, it means that the status quo of society has been disrupted so much that violence has taken over, and the main character is the victim. So in Othello, the status quo is completely shattered. This occurs when Othello, a black man, marries the wealthy white noblewoman Desdemona. Now, their act has broken the social conventions of the time. So once the social conventions have been broken, we begin to see the cruel, vicious, and murderous side of man. We see man's self-seeking, hatred, and his violence. Now in the play, Othello comes up against all of the evil that's around him. Now in Othello, we see an extreme form of disorder. Now the whole life seems close to chaos and meaninglessness. This terrible disorder leads to the death of the tragic hero. Now a bleak, disturbing vision of life is portrayed through Othello, and he's a tragic hero. Now Othello is initially a heroic general, but his own base passions gain control of his personality. A little bit about the background of the play. Now, the first act of the play takes place in Venice, which was a stable and powerful city-state in the 16th century. Cyprus is the setting for the rest of the play, and it's far less secure. Now, Venice owned Cyprus, but Cyprus at this point in the play is now under attack from the Turks. So when we look at the main characters, we start off in the middle with Othello. He's the main character. He's a Moorish general in the Venetian army, and he's going to be tricked by Iago. Now, he's married to Desdemona, which is on the scale beneath him, and she's accused of having an affair with Cassio. Now, Cassio, who's above Othello on our plotline, has been promoted in the army by Othello, and when drunk, he's going to fight Rodrigo. Even though he's accused of having an affair with Desdemona, he's just friends with her. Matter of fact, we actually have another love interest for Cassio. You can see on the left-hand side Bianca. Bianca's in love with Cassio, but she's presumed to be a prostitute. We have another person who actually is in love with Desdemona, and that's Rodrigo. Now, he's asked to marry her and was refused, and helps Iago in his plot against Othello. Remember, Othello and Desdemona broke social convention by marrying to each other because they're from different races. Rodrigo was asked to marry Desdemona first, but he was refused. So where did he get the idea of being asked to marry? Well, that'd be from Brabantio. And so if you look beneath Desdemona's name, that is Desdemona's father, Brabantio. He's angry about the elopement, and he warns Othello about his future. So that's when we start bringing in some characters who are more closely tied to Othello and Desdemona, the characters that are going to start bringing around the problems of the play. One of them is Iago. That's Othello's ensign in the army, and he believes Othello slept with his wife and therefore plots to destroy Othello by any means necessary. Now, Iago's wife, Emilia, happens to be Desdemona's maid, and she unintentionally is going to help Iago in his plot. So let's go ahead and move into Act 1. Now, Rodrigo is unhappy with Iago for failing to promote his marriage to Desdemona. She has recently married Othello instead. Now, Iago says that Othello has promoted an inexperienced soldier, Michael Cassio, over him. Therefore, he hates Othello and wants to take revenge on him. Now, to cause trouble, Iago urges Roderigo to wake up Brabantio, the father of Desdemona, and inform him that his daughter has eloped. Now, Brabantio discovers that Desdemona is not in her room, and calling for weapons, he sets out to locate Desdemona and Othello. Already in Act 1, Scene 1, all heck is breaking loose. So we have to set up conflict in the tragedy in Othello, and we're doing it already in Act 1, Scene 1. The topic of marriage seems of little political significance here. The men are going to make contracts with marriage, and elopement is just absolutely against social conventions. However, Shakespeare juxtaposes Roderigo's failure to marry Desdemona with Iago's failure to gain promotion. Now, Shakespeare makes it clear that private and public issues will eventually collide, and at the end of the scene, Brabantio arms himself and he rouses the neighborhood in order to find Desdemona. Now, Brabantio is making the marriage between Othello and Desdemona a public and a political affair, and the audience realizes that this marriage is going to be at the heart of the play. So when we start off looking at the language or the context of the play, the language that the men are using to define women in this particular scene is just absolutely obscene. The ways in which the male characters discuss women reveal the patriarchal context of the play. The imagery makes it clear that the male characters view women as possessions. Iago shouts to Brabantio, "Look to your house, to your daughter, and to your bags." Now, Brabantio believes that his daughter Desdemona has subverted the natural order. She eloped and chose her own husband. He calls that a treason of blood. Now, the image of Desdemona in the gross clasts of the lascivious Moor makes it plain that her revolt is absolutely outrageous to her father. Now, this is not just because she's eloped, but also because she is chosen outside of her race. She's chosen a person of color. Now, Brabantio chooses to lay the blame at Othello's door. According to Brabantio, her youth and maidenhood have been abused by Othello and his love potions. She couldn't have possibly chosen to go away with Othello. Now, this idea fits in with the Renaissance stereotype as a black man being a sexual predator. So our first impressions of Iago as the villain. He reveals his villainy very early on. He seems to have a clear motive for causing Othello harm. He tells Roderigo that he's bitter because preferment goes by letter and affection and not by that old gradation. In other words, he thought he should have gotten the promotion in the military and not Michael Cassio. Iago stresses that he only follows Othello to serve his turn upon him, and he's very good at getting himself out of trouble. He leaves the stage just as Brabantio discovers that Desdemona is gone. Now, there is a lot of truth in Brabantio's words to Iago, where he says, "Thou art a villain," but nobody seems to take those words to heart. And by the end of Act 1, Scene 1, Iago is established as being very manipulative and a powerful character who can instigate and stage manage chaos very effectively. So now that we're looking at Iago, we take a look at some of the words that he says. As you speak aloud some of his first words, in the tone you believe Iago would use, what meaning is being conveyed here by Iago's character? An old black ram is tupping your white ewe. I am not what I am. I do hate him, as I hate hell's pains. Poison his delight, and plague him with flies. 'Tis the curse of service. Preferment goes by letter and affection. So how is this context actually written? Well, Othello is written mainly in blank verse. You will see it in iambic pentameter. So the lines are 10 syllables long, and the form has a regular rhythm, and yet it doesn't rhyme. So as we look at all of these lines in particular, they're divided into pairs of syllables or feet, and each foot has one stressed syllable followed by an unstressed one. Now this is done to fit in with human speaking voice. It's flexible, and it can show different tones, but at the same time, it's poetic, and people will be entertained by the movement. So then we look at the scene analysis and Iago's use of imagery. He wants Roderigo to call up her father, to poison his delight and plague him with flies. Now, Iago's use of metaphors associates him with poison, corruption, and disease. You're supposed to be putting these words together with the idea of Iago's character. Now, Shakespeare's begun to prepare us for the poisoning of Othello's mind and foreshadowing what's going to occur in Act 3. Now, when we look at his crude and mocking language, some of the words that he gives definitely sets up this character for you to see him as a villain. He's going to say things such as horribly stuffed with the epithets of war. Even now, very now, an old black ram is tupping your white ewe. Your daughter and the Moor are now making the beast with two backs and the gross clasps of a lascivious Moor. It's very crude, very mocking about the sexual behaviors that he has no idea what's going on, and yet he is saying this out loud to anger, to stun, and to mock such a man as Brabantio. Now, he speaks a different language from the two other characters. Iago's crude and mocking in his descriptions of Othello, which we now today review as racist, but it's a key part of the negative black stereotype that is being created at this time period. Now, Iago's references to an old black ram, a Barbary horse, and the beast with two backs reinforce the idea that Desdemona has made an unnatural match. So when we take a look at some of these lines, we also have to look at Brabantio. We know Iago is an evil guy. He's going to be set up as a villain. But how is Brabantio being represented as the father? He says, "It is too true and evil, gone she is. And what's to come of my despised time is naught but bitterness. Now, Rodrigo, where didst thou see her? O unhappy girl! With the Moor, sayest thou? Who would be a father? How didst thou know 'twas she? Oh, she deceives me past thought. What said she to you? Get more tapers and raise all my kindred. Are they married, think you?" Rodrigo, who wanted to marry Desdemona, says, "Truly, I think they are." Brabantio answers, "O heaven, how got she out? O treason of the blood! Fathers from hence, trust not your daughter's mind, by what you see them act. Is there not charms by which the property of youth and maidhood may be abused? Have you not read, Rodrigo, of some such thing?" And that is our end of Act 1, Scene 1. Thank you so much for stopping by. If you'd like to continue on with Act 1, I do have other videos on the channel. If you'd like to learn more about Othello or other Shakespearean plays, check into some of my other playlists as well. And as always, I'd appreciate it if you subscribe. Thanks for stopping by.